Welcome to the Constructing a Business podcast. It's produced by the CMC Network. At CMC, we help minority and women-owned entrepreneurs overcome the challenges they face every day. We help them do that by offering great networking opportunities, incremental business growth, and construction-focused business coaching. I'm your host, Michael Lobether. I'm with Supporting Strategies. We're an outsourced virtual accounting team here in New York City. We help construction leaders build profit. Today on the pod, we have Nelson Tepfer. He is the leader of ProCFO Partners. He has 30 outsourced CFOs that work with him. That means he has been a strategic leader at a lot of different organizations. And as a strategic leader, Nelson and his team help people identify their long-term business goals, their operational roadblocks, and help them accomplish everything they need to do to reach their business destination. I'm excited to have him. He's very, very good at what he does. Nelson, how are you today?
Great, Michael. Thank you for having me on.
Of course. So the first question I like to ask every single person on this podcast, because we are a construction-related podcast, is of all the businesses, all the industries, what was it about construction that intrigued you and made you want to work with the CMC?
So construction is one of those industries where I think almost it gets taken for granted in a lot of what it does. Is everyone, especially here in the New York City area and the tri-state area, we all see everything going up on an ongoing basis, but we don't really think of everything that goes into putting something like that up, one of those projects. And when you talk about, and when we discuss this with business owners who actually are in the construction space, it's one where we found we can actually have a tremendous impact, because many of them, in order to deliver what they come from delivering the work themselves as opposed to running the business side of things. And that transition to doing the work themselves or selling the service themselves, delivering this product or service, to running a business around delivering a product or service, that transition is a difficult one very often for growing companies and many business owners. And that's one where we felt we could be able to help and actually have a tremendous impact in helping them make that transition.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I love the way you're really differentiating between delivering a service or a product, in this case, a building potentially, and the activities required to run a business. And, you know, most of the listeners and most of the members of the CMC are growing businesses. You know, they may be at 3 million in revenue, but their goals are well beyond that. When you're first interacting with a company of that size, construction or otherwise, do you see a trend, a common set of weaknesses or a common set of blind spots that the leadership has?
There are some pretty common issues for many companies of that size, but there are definitely nuances to each one we come across, and I think it's those nuances that make it interesting around what we do. So, you know, some of the common issues are around time management, are around clearly defining where they want to take the company. Again, when many organizations of this size are going through this first degree of scaling beyond what they themselves can deliver. So, for instance, to take the example that you started with, a $3 million business now needs to start thinking of their goal or where they're trying to be, not just in terms of a revenue target, because it means what their paycheck is going to be at the end of the year, but now it becomes to thinking of this a lot bigger. Where is the company going to be? What are the activities we need to do to help the company get there? And it's that shift in thinking as we find many business owners perhaps struggle with, or even if they think about it in the back of their minds, don't have that very clearly defined.
That is actually a big topic of conversation when I talk to our members who are actually owning a construction company, people who are working with Vivian in the coaching program. It's a huge shift in just perspective, right? Like you said, thinking more about the business. So let's tackle that, or let's get into that a little bit more. As that perspective shifts and their eyes maybe are open to the real challenges of scaling a business, what is that like as a strategic leader, as a strategic financial leader, guiding someone through that new realization about their business? Do you find that people get intimidated, or do you find that people are energized by that new challenge?
Both. is usually what we find. For us in practice, it becomes, we try to take the fear factor out of it, and that it becomes, this is the process you walk through to help you get there. So yes, it's defining the goals, it's defining the measurable targets for the goals, what are the strategies, it becomes more of a process and how it gets implemented. Now, us, as CFOs, it becomes how do we take those goals and turn that into the financial operations that is going to support those goals? What does this look like when you go back to your revenue model, deciding really what it is that makes you special? Many in the construction space very often end up doing a lot because, very often their clients need them to. But as they're growing beyond that, really what is their what makes them different in their space? Is it the interior? Is this the design of it? Is this the way they actually do it? Is it the level of talent that they have? There's a lot of different ways that they think about truly what makes them unique in delivering what they do. And for some of them, it's just the clarity on, okay, great, now I understand this part, that this is what makes me special. We can go focus on this to really grow this to where we're trying to. For others, it's just putting in some financial understanding or metrics around the actual function. How do we operate in this space? How do we build a real business around doing this work?
So what I love about what you just said is you combined a little bit of what sounded like marketing speak, right? What differentiates you? What are you best at? What is your highest value that you deliver? But then you kind of turned the corner and brought it into more of a financial leadership speak of what's the operation that supports those goals and how are we measuring the success as we implement those goals, right? So I think I want to share that because I want people to really understand the value and the role that a CFO plays. It is a broad perspective on business versus many other consultants in the world who may have a very niche perspective on things. When you engage with a new client and you're going through that process of identifying value and operational efficiency, how often are you educating people on the breadth of your perspective? Do they see you a certain way when they first begin the relationship, and then does that shift over time?
Yes, is the short answer. So very often we get introduced usually in a very specific context, which can be very narrow, it can be rather broad, but it's usually they have some kind of problem or issue going on. It's like, okay, yes, you should speak to Nelson. But they don't necessarily know what that means is what it is we're actually going to be doing. So there is a lot of education when we get started. And the education has a lot more to do with how all these different aspects of a company are intertwined. For instance, we don't have any budgets for next year. It's like, okay, great. What are we budgeting for?
Right.
It just becomes just that conversation is, okay, we want a budget for where we're trying to take the company. Great. Where are we trying to take the company? Okay, we need this. Then it becomes great. So we want to spend the money on this kind of system that's going to allow us to do all these kind of things. So the conversation gets very intertwined very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. So when we do get started, it is trying to be clear what is their most pressing need right now, which obviously is what we need to start with. But those issues that we're trying to solve for the short term, we were already thinking about this in the context of where they're trying to go in the bigger picture in the longer term.
So you may be thinking that before your client is.
Yes, but we need to explain to them that this is what we're thinking and why. Because you start explaining to them, we were asking you all of these questions. Without the why we're asking the questions, it's a little bit difficult to get the answers we need to be able to implement this. Going back to that budgeting conversation, again, we want a budget for next year. Okay, what are we budgeting for?
Right.
If we don't understand, if we don't explain that why we're asking that question or getting really detailed on it, they'll look at us. So why do we need to know all this information? I just need a budget. And the answer is you need to know all this information because we want this budget to actually be something that's useful for you. We want this to be something that's going to help you, achieve what you're trying to.
Right. Not a budget for budget's sake, but a budget for growth's sake.
Yes.
Right. Moving forward.
Absolutely.
So that's a lot. I mean, that is a lot, right? You're bringing a lot of new ideas and perspective to growing businesses. Are there times when you need to bring in other professionals or recommend your client hire additional business talent to help make these things repeatable within the business? Or do you stay on as long as they need and continue to help guide them down the path?
So again, the answer is yes. We take on the role of the CFO just on a part-time basis. It's a part-time CFO with all-time commitment. But we're not the ones who should be doing everything within an organization. What we focus on is helping companies build the function so it's systematic, sustainable, and scalable, really building out that framework for financial management and growth. And for different companies, that may take different forms. Sometimes that is helping to hire as someone internally. Sometimes that is outsourcing different functions externally. Sometimes that is advising them to upgrade some of their professional relationships, not because of change just for change's sake, but for them to recognize the value they should be getting for some of these professional relationships.
Right. Right. They're going to have to edit this gap out because I have a question I want to ask you, and it completely slipped my mind.
No, that's all right.
So, Elizabeth, pay attention. This is not part of the podcast. Okay. So let me ask you this, Nelson. How much of what you do is just smart business decisions that you could apply to any industry, and how much of what you bring to the table is actually specific to a given industry?
So that's always a fun conversation we get involved with. As our team has grown, we've certainly come from having the experience across numerous different industries. I believe at last count, we're currently working with 26 or 27 different industries.
Wow.
So there's a lot of industries where the issues we're helping the business owner solve have nothing to do with the industry that they're in. But then there is a lot where the specific industry knowledge helps us come up with the solutions that are relevant for that industry or for that specific business. So we have people who've been at the highest levels of some of the largest companies around the world. But when it comes to helping companies like this is something that they're interested in doing now because this allows them to have the impact that they want to. Very often they have left those larger organizations, as they've put it, because it's not fun anymore. They've been very successful, and now they're trying to help these companies because it allows them to have this meaningful impact to them. So when we're talking about specific industries, there are differences between managing a construction site than running a law firm. There are differences to running a law firm and running a manufacturing plant. There are differences in manufacturing plant than a design firm. There are nuances for every industry. There are some underlying factors across them. The strategic planning or some of the steps involved in there is probably more relevant across industry. But how some of that gets implemented, which systems you use, what is the process for financial operations will very often vary, but by industry. Some of the KPIs or the common ways of measuring things within an industry will vary from industry to industry. But it's the same underlying discipline in what are the things that need to be built and understanding what are the things that need to be built, which is probably true across almost every industry. It's that understanding of what it's supposed to look like at the end is true across industry.
I love that. So on your team, you're up to roughly, or coming up to about 30 partners working with you at ProCFO Partners. Who's and you don't have to say their name if you don't want to, but what's the background of your strongest construction partner?
They've built infrastructure across the globe for various for various different types of entities and companies. We've also have one specific to whether it's building commercial housing or building some of the skyscrapers we're used to in this area. They've had different roles in different companies. Some of them are direct GC, some have been more with the ancillary type of construction areas, for different parts of those construction projects. So the short version is quite a bit and wide-ranging.
Right, but it matches up with what you said at the end of the previous question is that they know what it's supposed to look like at the end, right? If you have a company that's building globally, obviously they're way beyond 1 or 2 million a year in revenue. They're probably beyond even the wildest goals of most leaders of a construction firm. Maybe not in terms of total revenue and complexity, but they know where it's supposed to lead, right? So those people with that vision can guide a small business in the right direction without mishaps necessarily in terms of going in the wrong direction for a while, then realizing, oh, this is a dead end. They know it's a dead end, so you avoid that, making the growth of the business in question much more efficient. Tell me, I guess I am curious, just personally, and I think most of our listeners would be, what is the first conversation? If somebody reaches out to you, they're talking to you, maybe one of your partners, what's the scope of that first conversation to determine, what value you can bring to the table?
So our first conversations are usually we're just there to make sense, to see what's going on. What's going on over there that makes sense for us to have this conversation. We get introduced to a lot of companies, and very often one of my first questions with a business owner is, okay, why does this person think it makes sense for us to have a conversation? What's going on over there? There's obviously something where, some framework that's going on. Listening to what they're talking about. Then, okay, fine. Now that we've framed what the high level, or at least what they understand their issue to be, is, okay, good. Now, what is the role of this finance and accounting function in general? We shift to that side of the conversation. What does this framework look like for you, and which one of the areas are you having an issue with that's highlighting the issue you're referring to? So we're able to tie those two together to say, okay, you're having this issue within this framework of running a business, of running a finance or accounting department. This is where that issue fits within this greater framework. This is what it all looks like together. This is how we may be able to help you do this, but that doesn't mean we are the solution for every single business we speak to, especially at that first conversation.
Right. So there are times you may refer them to another party who is more skilled or more specifically geared toward that problem first.
Absolutely. We have had conversations where business, again, depending on how we're introduced, where a business owner thinks they need us, and we explain, no, it's not us that you need, it's a different bookkeeping solution. It's not us that you need, it's a different accountant. It's not us that you need, it's a different sales team that you have in place. It's not us that you need, it's a different ERP solution. It's not us that you need, it's a different CRM. We can go down the list of the different things that they're running into, but the first conversation is, okay, what's really going on? Because even if we can't help them directly ourselves, we probably have a resource we can probably introduce who can help them.
Well, that's outstanding. I mean, obviously, for anyone who's hearing this, if you have a business, having that conversation with Nelson or a member of his team is valuable, period. Right? I mean, you may uncover that the solution to the problem you perceive may be something you never considered or would never have the resource to solve in the first place. I mean, I know, Nelson, that you are very well connected in the New York business community and beyond, and I'm sure that that is part of the value you bring to that conversation is you have a lot of strong partners who can jump on, take ownership of an issue and solve it for the client. And I know as one of those people that I will send them back to you when they are asking me questions of a strategic nature, and I know it's time for them to engage with you and your team. So I do understand how that process works. Is there anything we didn't cover that you think is important for a listener to know about related to what you bring to the table, what your team brings to the table?
I think we covered a lot of it. There's a lot of more resources on our website, which talks about generally some of what these things look like. Everyone can feel free to check everything out over there. But I do believe we covered a lot of it. I know you and I work together with some companies in this space as well, specifically. There are a lot of different things, a lot of different aspects of what it looks like when you work with many companies. But among the most important parts is really being clear on what the goals are and how they translates into the financial operations and the running of the business.
Beautiful. So if somebody did want to find you or find your website, where should they go, Nelson?
ProCFOPartners.com.
Easy enough. ProCFOPartners.com. Same goes for us here at the CMC. If you want to find out more about us, connect with Viv, talk about your goals in your construction business, go to www.cmcnetwork.co. There's a lot of good content. There's some good video content. The podcasts are hosted there, and you can learn a lot about what we're helping people achieve in their business. This is Michael Obither with Supporting Strategies. Thanks for listening.